What a hockey game. Once again, welcome to the Toronto Maple Leafs post-game reaction show here
Yeah.
live on Toronto Sports Rush, brought to you by the Bet Rivers Network. My name is Kyle Andrew. I'm joined once again by NHL analyst E.J. Hradek. But before we begin, folks, like and subscribe. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. We bring you the best Toronto sports content all the time, but tonight it's all Leafs all the time, and their old nemesis is building. EJ, different hockey team came out in the third period. What a game.
Yeah, that was a crazy, silly hockey game, but it was a game that if you're a Leafs fan or if you're the Leafs, I mean, you're thrilled because those are the kind of games you only win when when you've had a good year, when you're a confident group, when you find ways to win. I mean, they lost Chris Tanev early in the game. They're playing five defensemen. At the end of the game, Nylander was on the bench. Something was wrong. Looked like with one of it. I think it was his left arm, but I'm not 100% sure. They were down 3-0 in the game. They gave up a couple of power play goals. They didn't look like they had much life. And then in the third period, they got it tied up. They fall behind again on a disastrous turnover by McCabe, and then they still tie it up. Pontus Holmberg, I mean, out of nowhere, this guy hadn't scored in 17 games. Now he has 4 goals in his last 3 games. He scores on the last minute to tie it, and then Marner in overtime after an unbelievable save by Stolarz. And Stolarz was the story. He was great all night. So it was there was so many things that happened in the game. It was crazy.
You know, you touched on a lot of things there, and we saw great performances by the players we would expect tonight. Of course, we had the Stolarz performance, but what we saw a lot of that you mentioned was the Leafs just have so much more depth than we've seen in the past. When guys have off nights, when there are bad starts, when there are terrible turnovers, someone is stepping up, and it's not always the same characters. Talk about their depth.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The depth is certainly better. I've said it really all year long about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I feel like this team is much more contender than pretender. This is what they've built all year long as we're now into late February. This has been a team that finds ways to win. They've had unlikely heroes come through. Holmberg coming through in this game today to tie it. I think Nick Robertson is on fire right now, although he only scores on the road apparently. He's got 11 goals, 10 of them on the road. So, unlikely guys coming through for the Leafs right now. And then the big boys are coming up big. I mean, Marner was great tonight. I feel for Austin Matthews. He probably never wants to see TD Garden ever again in his life because, I mean, inside a week, he gets robbed for Team USA in those late minutes there in overtime by Jordan Binnington. They lose that game. And then here he is tonight. He had two rockets off the post and one shorthanded in the first period, one in the third period. So he just seems to be a little snake bit there, but he made a great play in batting the puck ahead to Marner. And then Mitch Marner is just a wizard with the puck, and he beat Swayman, and the Leafs ended up winning the game. But just everybody's contributing, and that's what you love to see.
Truly. And what we saw tonight was definitely for twofold. Like the Boston Bruins, they're not quite the same team they've been over the last few years, but they're also not terrible. Like they're just more of a middle of the pack team. But to go into that arena and win tonight the way they did, coming back from a terrible start and a terrible third period giveaway, these are the type of character wings that does take a team into contender status. And we haven't seen it in the past like this, and this is a good time of year to do it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're right. The Bruins are not nearly the team they were. They're missing really some key guys on defense with Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm out of the mix. But, we saw again tonight, David Pastrnak is dynamic. He had a pair of goals in the game. The Bruins had a 3-0 lead in this game. They had a 4-3 lead late in the game. Give the Leafs a lot of credit with down Tanev. And I mean, that's something to be worried about, right? Chris Tanev hurt in the first couple of minutes of the game, took a hit from John Beecher in the corner, left the ice kind of gingerly, went down the tunnel, did not return. So we'll have to keep an eye on what's going to happen there because let's face it, Chris Tanev is a huge part of this team and a huge part of that back end for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we'll have to keep an eye on that injury. But they found a way. And, I can't say enough because after 2 periods, they did, even though it was, it was a 3-1 game, they didn't really look like they had much life and energy in the game. And boy, give them a lot of credit. They got that early goal, Marner, early in the third period on the power play, and then the comeback was on.
Yeah, that's a long time to play on a road game with only 5 defensemen. As you said, he went out in the first minute, and we have to talk about it. He has been such a rock for them back there all year. And as the trade deadline approaches, we're now 10 days out. People are already talking that it's either like a third line character center or a defenseman. We don't know the extent of the injury. It happened 2.5 hours ago, but it probably places greater emphasis on what they're shopping for at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously, if it's something more significant, then they've got to look really into maybe adding another defenseman of note if they can find one and if they can afford one. I mean, they don't have necessarily the draft pick capital to make that happen. They've got some really good prospects in their group, but do they want to give them up at this point in time? So they've been connected to some centermen. We've heard a lot about, Shen from St. Louis obviously has a connection there with Berube. There's some talk, even both brothers, Luke Shen, I think that'd be his third time with the Leafs, but, there's some talk about the Shen brothers coming maybe in different trades. So, we'll see how that plays out, but certainly we have to keep an eye on the injury to Tanev. And I think really at the end of the day, I mean, the depth has been good for the Leafs, but you saw tonight the real reason why the old saying is true in hockey. You never have enough defensemen going into the playoffs. These guys get dinged up. They get worn out sometimes. You need to have more guys. So it'll be interesting to see what Brad Treliving and company can do before next Friday.
If you were the one picking, would you be looking for a forward or a defenseman right now? Let's forget the injury.
Yeah.
Let's just...
Yeah, I think that they seem to have a hole for a second center, or another center in that mix to kind of flush out their forward group a little bit better. That said, I like their defense now that more than I have in the past. But as I just mentioned to you, Kyle, I mean, you just never have enough defensemen in the playoffs. So, I mean, maybe that's a depth player. We'll see if they can get someone like Shen. These guys won a Stanley Cup. I said he's got familiarity with the coach, but that's not a cheap acquisition. He's got time left on a contract, and he's not a younger player either. So there's a lot to consider, for the Leafs over the next several days here. But it's been a terrific season. It's kind of wide open. This is a huge win tonight because it keeps them atop the Atlantic Division. And I think really the important thing for the Leafs moving forward here is it would be great to win the Atlantic Division just to set them up. Let Florida and Tampa, battle each other in the first round. Take your chances with one of those wild card teams. Listen, that's not going to be easy either, but having to have to go through both of those teams, which was what will likely happen if you finish second or even third with Tampa moving up the standings. I think the better path would be to try to continue moving forward, win that division, and take your chances with one of the wild cards.
Absolutely. We have to talk about back to whether or not they need a defenseman to put in, whether or not they can afford to put a defenseman in.
Yeah.
How much of an impact is it? They have arguably the best 1-2 punch in the net that they've ever had on this hockey team. Yeah. They have two potential number one goalies on any team in the league. That has to help when you're shopping around and leaning, forward or defenseman. And Stellaris, once again, as you mentioned off the hop, he was the best player on the ice tonight, as he's been frequently lately.
Yeah, he's been back healthy again. And I think for the Leafs, I think it's terrific that they got both these guys because the problem is they both tend to get dinged up a little bit. And Stolarz is a big guy, and he got run into tonight by Lohrei at the end of the game. I was a little concerned as soon as I saw that. He's just coming back from an injury, not too long ago. Both Stolarz and Wall have had a history of having some injury issues, but they've both played off each other well. I think the fact that Craig Berube can bounce back and forth between those two guys, I think that's the key. I don't care which, they're talking, on the broadcast about, who would be the starter in the playoffs. Who cares at this point? They're both playing really well. If they're both healthy, then that's a good problem to have. Who's going to start? I'm not guaranteed that those guys will be healthy at the same time. I'm hoping they will be. But the history has been that, it's not always the case. So for me, it's been a blessing for them. Stolarz came in early when Wall was out. He established himself. Wall came back, played well. Stolarz then got hurt. Wall took the net and played really well. And now, I think in a perfect world for the Leafs, these guys will just alternate down this last 6-7 weeks of the season and give them that great 1-2 punch in the postseason.
Yeah, and it's tremendous knowing that come the playoff time, a clear number one may or may not emerge. It's so very much like the Toronto sports media to immediately be
Yeah.
speculating about who's going to be starting in the playoffs. Like, can we get through 3/4 of the season first?
You don't even know who's going to be healthy. I mean, listen,
Exactly.
both of the guys could be healthy. Both the guys could be hurt. We don't really know. There's a lot of time left. And you know what? Craig Berube and his staff, they'll look at it. They'll see where they are at the start of the playoffs. If both guys are healthy, they'll start one guy. And I don't know if they'll try to rotate them. Maybe they'll start one guy, and if he plays well, he'll stay in the net until he doesn't play well, and they'll go in another direction. But the bottom line is, for this team, it's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. Goaltenders understand that you always ride a hot hand, and the team playing in front of them has great faith in both of these guys. I don't think they can possibly lose in this scenario. Like, it's a great problem to have, as you say. So let's look ahead on the schedule a little bit. They have 2 more games left on this road stand. In New York to play the Rangers Friday, at Pittsburgh on Sunday afternoon early before they head back home to play San Jose Monday night. I think that's the Amazon game.
Yeah.
These are winnable hockey games for them. So we're going to see, some shift in net, maybe some line juggling, but basically they're now trying to finish as high up in the standings as possible. And in the past, these are the types of games that are winnable and on the table to be won that they wouldn't always take. So if they get 2 or 3 of these, or they sweep right through, they'll be sitting, they could win this conference.
Yeah, they can win the division. I don't think they're going to win the conference. I don't think they're catching Washington. Washington is in a good spot. But I would say this about, the schedule for the Leafs down the stretch. It is a favorable schedule. It is not an overly difficult schedule when you go through it. And, you got the Rangers coming up. Rangers are beating the Islanders tonight. They're having a good performance tonight, but they have not been very good of late. Then you get Pittsburgh, who's getting killed by Philadelphia tonight. They have struggled mightily all year long. So then you come back home, you get San Jose the next night. I mean, that's just the 3-game window ahead of them. You try to take it, as the old cliche is, 1 game at a time. But I just think the schedule is favorable. If they can stay healthy, we'll see what they do before the deadline. I've said it all year. I like this team much better than I've liked them in recent years with the changes they've made. We'll see if they can keep the ball rolling forward. But this was one of those wins when you look back at this season, if they have a long run or maybe go all the way through, you'll look back at this night and you'll say, boy, that was a special game, because they should have lost that game. They found a way to win.
They were once again outshot. They were in the penalty box a ton in the first 2 periods. They did everything they needed to do to lose the hockey game and showed the character to win. And this, as you say, if they go deep in the playoffs, if they could somehow raise the cup, this is the type of game you look back on and go, this is where they matured.
Gives you confidence. It definitely gives you confidence. And, Marner, it's funny watching Marner coming out of the 4 Nations there. I mean, he played so well, made some monster plays. I mean, boy, he's never looked more confident. I mean, he was wheeling and dealing tonight. I thought he was terrific.
Okay, speaking of the 4 Nations, I want to shift focus a little bit here, because there was some talk early in the game about the coaching staff, or maybe it was the pre-show, I don't recall exactly. The coaching staff showed some concerns about the fatigue of Marner and Matthews, and that's true of multiple teams across the league who had Canadian or American players who went so hard in this tournament. How much do you think this kind of talk and the injury to Tkachuk and things we've seen affect the prospects of this happening again down the road?
I mean, I think it's just the risks that you run. I just think it's well worth it. I think the juice is worth the squeeze, or so to speak. I mean, I just think that they got so much. The game got so much of a benefit out of this, and it's. For me, if you run one of these tournaments in September, first of all, nobody in the U.S. is going to care. And, not that it's the end all be all, but there's 340 million people here. And there's, 24 of the 32 teams along the lines play in the United States. I think you're looking to grow the game here. And, to play in September, nobody's going to care. And you still run the same risk of injuries, and you make your season really long for those guys who have to go into camp in August and get ready. So, I mean, there's all risk involved with these things, but I think the reward, as we've just seen, is really great for the game and for the league and for the players in the big picture. So, for me, I think the risk is the reward is definitely worth the risk.
So much came together in order for that to benefit the league. I guess at the end of the day, this really comes down to the owners of these teams deciding, was this worth the risk to our players? but we have players in mid-season form, as you say. I mean, you go back to like an 87 Canada Cup, it's being run at a different time of year. They're not in mid-season form, and it makes a huge difference to the product on the ice. It also makes a huge difference, as you stated, to the amount of audience even paying attention to the game of hockey.
Yeah.
And this year, your post Super Bowl, you've got the same weekend the NBA had an absolutely awful showing of their all-star performance, and they're generally down a little bit in the ratings across the board. Great time for hockey to strike. And to my next point, over to the Washington Capitals, who we don't believe the Leafs are going to catch. Ovi scores number 883 tonight. It seems increasingly likely that he gets the record this season. What a 1-2 punch for hockey should he be able to do that.
Hey, listen, he might get the record next week. I mean, he is. This is like is a ridiculous. This guy is on a ridiculous run right now.
A heater.
To score again, he had the hat trick against the Oilers, and he did not play and did not participate, so he had a chance to rest. As did all the Washington Capitals. Hard to believe that none of the Capitals, the American players, Canadians, Finns, Swedes, none of them were part of the Four Nations face-off. But a huge benefit for that team. They're rested. And, one other benefit here for all the other players, they got this break. So as we come down the stretch, the star players, went through a little bit here and had to play some high intensity hockey. Yeah. But everybody else got a break. So everybody else is really fresh. And I think that will help the product down the stretch. And I think there'll be time for the guys who are involved in this to kind of find some break, some rest along the way here. But don't overlook the fact that these guys, the majority of players in the league had basically a 2-week break.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Like it's a free rehab time. So we might see a higher quality of hockey. And to be fair to the Four Nations, it was fast NHL rules hockey. And with the exception of some pre-scripted fights, there was a lot of contact, but it was not as physical as the regular game because of the skill players were all out to play. So it's maybe slightly less risk of injury, but again, it's just worth it for what we saw. And with Ovechkin not being able to play, I'm guessing down the road, once political tides have changed, they're going to have to go to like a Six Nations type setup and include the Czechs and the Russians, which means maybe one extra game each team has played at that point, 2 conferences of 3.
Well, the idea will be to play a World Cup of hockey. And if they do that, ideally in a perfect world, which we clearly do not live in, but, we'll see where things play out, in 2028, when the plan is to play a World Cup of hockey. I would imagine they would like to have 8 nations.
Sure.
So we'll see how that unfolds. We have the Olympics next year. This world, as you know, is changing minute by minute right now. So we'll see where things play out there. But it was a terrific tournament, and I think it was great for hockey. And the fact that it was in February, it's hockey weather. Yeah. And I know in the States, when the Super Bowl ends, hockey fans sports fans go into mourning almost, because it's like they have nothing to, there's nothing really that's exciting. And then this just jumped off the screen at people. So, looking forward to the Olympics next year, and then in a couple of years, the World Cup of Hockey. I think it'll be a nice rotation for the league to have this best on best, come up every couple of years.
International hockey is back, baby, and I love every second of it. One more point on Ovi, and this is a stat I heard the other day that I think is maybe the most impressive thing I've heard about him. First player in NHL history to score 200 goals in 3 different decades.
Wow.
That's remarkable consistency. Yeah. He's a 39-year-old man. He's been playing since he was a teenager. That's pretty impressive. We need to get him on the international scene of hockey.
That is quite impressive when you think about it. I guess he came into the league after the work stoppage, so that would have been the 05-06 season. Mm-hmm. So he had those seasons. And then the first couple of years he was in Washington, he was very good, but the team was terrible. It wasn't until Bruce Boudreau got there a couple of years later, and a lot of the young players that came with Bruce from Hershey really emerged, and the Capitals kind of took off. But this is a guy that he may end up scoring 1,000 goals in this league. I mean, I don't think you can write it off. I mean, he's clearly going to pass Gretzky the way he's going. I mean, most likely this season at this pace. And I don't think, he's on pace. He's on a 50-plus goal pace this year. I don't see any reason why he would be looking to retire. And the Washington Capitals have a very good team again. So we'll just have to watch and see. Obviously, he's going to have to stay healthy, but An
That's one
amazing
of the
story.
big things. A lot of times when we see a player chasing records like these, especially when you've been with the same team your whole career, you're kind of playing a little past your expiration date, and he is so clearly not doing that. He's the son of Olympians. I mean, he takes his physical health pretty seriously. I also think 1,000's on the table. 950 certainly is within reach, but
and again, don't underestimate the fact that this team they have a really good hockey team. This is not a fluke. This is a big, strong team. They've got good players at all positions. They are like Toronto. They've got a couple of goalies. Logan Thompson has emerged, but they've got Lindgren as well there. They're really well coached. Ovechkin is in a situation now with this team playing so well. Oftentimes they're leading in games. He's had a number of empty net goals this year. You're not getting those opportunities if your team is trailing or you're losing. They're getting he's in all kinds of offensive situations. The coach can put him out there in games where they have maybe a comfortable lead. So it's all favorable for Ovechkin, and he has performed and taken advantage of these things.
Okay, very briefly shifting back to the Leafs, although there's not too much to discuss. We saw it in a very interesting hockey game, a tale of two games. The first and the second period were one thing. The third period was a different Leafs hockey team. With the consistency moving into the playoffs, these types of character wins, you have to grab home ice advantage ideally, and then win a few of these on the road. Because one of these nights, the goalie is going to have a bad game, but they've shown consistently the ability to power through when their best players aren't the best players. There's a new best player seemingly every night, a new character guy scoring a goal, setting up a goal, providing a big hit. Who's next? Who's the next one to emerge?
Well, they probably need Max Domi to score, right? I mean, he's been in a little bit of a drought, but he's been a helpful player. He gets involved physically. That line with Robertson and Domi and McCann has been a very good line for them. We'll have to see what happens with William Nylander. Hopefully that wrist or arm that he was looking at on the bench late isn't going to be too bad. But they've been getting a lot of production from all just different sources, and this is how you win. At the end of the day, this is how you win. You have to have contributions from different parts of your lineup, and obviously your big guys have to play well. And Matthews and Marner, Matthews. The only issue with Matthews has been being a little dinged up this year and missing time, but he's on pace, I think, to score 40 goals even with the missed time. And obviously, Marner's been great. Nylander's played well. We'll see where it goes, Kyle. But I like as things have unfolded throughout the whole season. They've been building, which you like to see. And now the question is, will management get involved here and make an acquisition, make a deal or two, add a piece or two before the deadline? We'll see. It's coming up March 7th, which is about 10 days from now.
Well, I don't think I could have said that any better. So let's leave the fans with that as a recap of their season up till now. We'll have lots to say on this channel, the Toronto Sports Rush, brought to you by Bet Rivers, about the trade deadline, especially should the Leafs pull the trigger and make a big move down the stretch here. Once again, this is a Maple Leafs post-game reaction show on the Toronto Sports Rush Network. My name is Kyle Andrew. I have been joined once again by the incredible hockey analyst, E.J. Hradek. Thank you, and have a great night.